Thank you so much for taking the time to share our results. I'm Nisha Ali of Spin VFX, and I co-chair CASO with Matt Bishop, who is animation and VFX executive producer of Sinking Ship Entertainment. Some of you may know that CASO is a nonpartisan, nonprofit industry association, and we are committed to the growth and international competitiveness of Ontario's animation and visual effects industry. We do this through advocacy, professional development, and marketing initiatives. So we want to thank you all today for joining us for the launch of the findings from the survey conducted by Nordicity. I hope you find the survey, as we have in CASO's broadband and cloud services, very informative and helpful to your future planning. We wouldn't have been able to provide the survey to you if it wasn't for the generous support of Ontario Creates, the City of Toronto, Stratagem Studios, Greenfield, RBC, and last but not least, we want to thank Nordicity for their great patronage in working with us. To kick things off, I would like to introduce you to Karen Thornstone, President and CEO of Ontario Creates. Karen has been President and CEO of Ontario Creates since 2007. She oversees all aspects of the agency's programs and services, which does serve as a catalyst for the economic development in Ontario's creative industries. Karen and her amazing team has been working with us, CASO, and enabling our business intelligence data gathering for years. And we're so incredibly grateful for their support. So over to you, Karen.
Thanks, Nisha, and hi, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here this afternoon to help launch CASO's most recent study, all about how broadband and cloud services can help Ontario's animation and VFX sector adapt to those new work practices that we've all been starting to experience over the last couple of years. As I think you know, and as Nisha was saying, our mandate at Ontario Creates is really to facilitate economic development and investment and collaboration in Ontario's creative industries. So supporting all of you, our content creating companies, in that transition to the sort of post-pandemic reality is a really important priority for us. It's certainly no secret that the world has changed a lot over the past 2 years, and all of you Ontario's content creators have shown incredible resilience and innovation, and proving that you've got the imagination and the creativity to rise to any challenge that's put in front of you, and to continue to deliver that award-winning content to audiences all around the world. Many industries have been brought to their knees over the last couple of years, but film and television production in this province has been able to continue, and to continue strongly. In 2020, film and television production supported by Ontario contributed $1.5 billion in production spending to the economy, and supported nearly 30,000 jobs for Ontarians. And animation and VFX companies alone represent more than 7,000 of those jobs. And we certainly saw a decline in theater box office over the past couple of years, but that rising demand for media consumption at home put a lot of pressure on our animation and VFX studios to deliver more content and to do it faster. And you responded to that. Our animation, VFX, and post-production studios were all able to remain open through 2020. You implemented new work from home processes and new technologies, and you grew, which is amazing in so many ways. 92% of the companies that were surveyed for the study we're going to talk about today hired additional employees over the course of the pandemic. And together you generated something in excess of 190 million in production on some very recognizable and highly successful projects. So congratulations on that amazing accomplishment. No small feat under the circumstances. But the big question now, of course, going forward is, how do we capitalize on those pandemic-driven sort of innovative strategies so that we can increase capacity, retain workforce, improve profit margins, and ultimately create a long-term competitive advantage for Ontario's animation and VFX industry. And it's that question that makes us so excited to support this piece of research so that we can better understand what the opportunities are to grow our animation and VFX sector in Ontario without necessarily expanding commercial real estate investments, but instead by adopting a hybrid work model and leveraging emerging technologies. Having had a bit of a sneak peek at the study, Christian's going to present in just a minute. I'm pretty confident that it's going to offer some interesting findings that we're all going to need to understand as we try to shape the future of this industry. So let me join in the thanks that Nisha was offering by saying thanks to CASO in particular, and obviously to Nordicity and all of the other funding partners for making this research possible, and for your dedication to the success of Ontario's animation and VFX sector. And I also want to thank our research team at Ontario Creates for recognizing the importance of this study at this time and for their ongoing commitment to keeping our creative industries on the leading edge. We are really very lucky in this province to have deep capacity and deep talent across all of our creative industries. And I, for one, am very excited about the future of animation and VFX in Ontario, and I hope you are too. So with that, let's get on with the insights that you came to hear. I'm pleased to introduce you to Christian Roberts, who many of you probably know. He is the co-CEO and managing partner at Nordicity. Christian specializes in economic policy and research, particularly in digital media and emerging technologies and film and television. So needless to say, he was well qualified as the lead investigator on this project, and he's going to share some of the highlights about what we learned. And maybe I should also just say before you start, Christian, that there is a Q&A or at least a chat function at the bottom of your screen. And if you've got questions as we go, please put them in there, and Sarah will monitor and Christian will address them when the time is right. So use that function, and I'm going to hand it over to Christian from here.
Thanks so much, Karen. And yeah, we'll get to the Q&A at the end. There's a nice little Q&A section. I'll try to go as fast as I can so that we have as much time to talk about your questions as we can. Before I press the share screen button and we get into the data, I want to make sure I thank the people who, from my perspective, need to be thanked, which is my team, most notably Lola Zhang, Hong Yoon, who did the hard work that I get to talk about today. I also have a team that works just on the maps, and so that's Leanne and Alex, who really lent their shoulder to the wheel. And terabytes of data later, we have maps that allow us to figure out where there is broadband in various parts of Ontario. So now I'm going to press that shiny green share screen button, and we're going to go and share one of my screens. So before I launch into the actual study, just a brief word about Nordicity, because we are, of course, being recorded. Nordicity is a consulting firm that we specialize in policy and economic analysis in these cultural media sectors. We have offices in Vancouver, Toronto, and in London, although like many of the people on this call, the concept of an office is increasingly foreign to us. By the end of this month, there will be a Nordicity team member on every continent of the planet, except for Antarctica, at least so far as I know. So what were we asked to do? As we've alluded to already, Nordicity was given the mandate to understand trends as they relate to the use of cloud technologies in the animation visual effects sector in Ontario. As the project evolved, it became increasingly clear to us that it was not only about the use of those technologies, but also about the context in which those technologies are being used. And so we explored the current work practices of CASO member companies as they continue to adapt to this sadly ongoing pandemic. to attempt to look a little bit more forward, we also then we mapped, of course, the availability of broadband data in Ontario against the roles and tasks being undertaken by people who actually work in the industry. Largely that was done by desk research, trends and so forth, consultations, including many of the people on this call, and diving into the available data that is provided by a couple of sources that we'll get into as it relates to broadband capacity. So just very briefly, we all know the market context. I think Karen summed it up better than I have here, which is that the pandemic created an unprecedented level of demand for content, as everybody was stuck at home watching Netflix, and those types of content, at least in the initial parts of the pandemic, that could be created without the need for a physical set, were in extra high demand. As well, anybody who had anything in the can that could be that visual effects could be layered upon wanted to get that to market as quickly as possible. In order to facilitate that, there was the shift to a work from home environment, which changed how the workflows operated and how every company on this call functions. Some of the technologies that we looked at became part of this of this study included the adoption of increasing levels of 5G technologies and cloud technologies, including both storage and cloud computing. This is, of course, in the context that governments and telecommunication companies continue to try to roll out 5G, or whatever 5G means when they talk about it, in areas where broadband installation may be impossible. Why I look at these in the first place, the idea would be not only that it allows for more distributed workflows, but it may also help to lower fixed cost and improve the scalability of these companies and or their flexibility. You don't always have to invest in the servers. I should point out here that these technologies are not the only ones that one could look at. The use of things like low Earth orbit satellites, LEOs, may accomplish some of the same goals as a rollout of 5G. In Ontario, the rollout of broadband or high-speed broad internet has been largely uneven. And as we'll get into in a second, what the government of Ontario has thus far deemed to be high-speed broadband is anything that is over 50 megabits per second. As we'll see through this presentation, that may or may not be sufficient for various tasks in various animation or VFX post-production tasks. The current aim is to have everybody in Ontario have access to that level of broadband by 2025, with particular parts of rural Ontario in the north, southwest, and eastern Ontario focused for its development. That is, of course, also where people want to move when they leave major urban centers. So that there is necessarily a connection between those two concepts. I would point out also, though, that 50 megabits is a pretty low in the grand scheme of high-speed internets, and is basically enough to allow for one or two people to be on Zoom calls at the same time. Not quite enough for, as we'll see in a few slides, for people to undertake high-end visual effects or animation tasks. In a minute, I'm going to jump to a map, but I wanted to spend a minute to tell you a little bit about how that broadband availability map was created. Owing to the relative lack of granularity in the data of speeds above 50 megabits, we combined two sources of data: the National Broadband Data Map, which is that first source of data, and Measurement Labs user speeds which provide a database of the most frequent test speeds of 50 megabits a second or above. We were able to combine these two data sets at the forward sortation area, which is the first three digits of your postal code level, and then map that to the entire province of Ontario. We then, of course, figured out, know where all the animation studios are, and we asked a couple hundred and people who work for animation or visual effects companies to identify where they are, so we could figure out if there are people in areas that have sufficient broadband. So this is the map that we created. This is the combination of those two data sources, and you can see that it is an uneven rollout thus far. If there is time towards the end of this this discussion, we can switch to the live maps. These are all available, built in Tableau, and available for tinkering. What you see here is that as I said, it's kind of a patchwork solution in terms of where there is available broadband across the province of Ontario. And again, we'll get back to this if there's time. As I alluded to earlier, there was 2 surveys were part of the part of our data collection process. There were 2, a company survey, which collected information from 12 CASO members, which represent about just over 1,600 employees, and a company survey, which for whatever reason was better filled out by via responses from VFX companies. I know that the numbers don't add up. My table is incorrect. But we received 138 individual responses, enough to get a sense of what was going on. So we're going to start and go through this sort of one survey at a time, so you get a sense of where companies are coming from, and then where employees are coming from. Then we'll kind of look at them a little bit together. In terms of hiring practices, I guess Karen already scooped this slide, pointing out that 92% of those respondents, or 10 of 12 or whatever that is, grew their headcount over the course of the pandemic. Those same companies, of course, reported that when polled, most of those employees were working remotely in the same city as their company. Interestingly, though, almost a third, were working outside or still within Ontario, but outside of the city where their company is located, and that likely we didn't do a before and after, so we don't have the before, but the during, I suppose, picture is one that probably is more distributed than it may have been before, with again about 30% of the workforce not located in the same city as the home office. We also noted that the companies at their offices had on average a 1.2 gigabit connection. So if you recall that the granularity of the data provided by the province only goes to 50 megabits, and the average company speed at their offices is 1.2 gigabits, you sort of see that there's a wide range between what companies expect as where they operate, wide gap between where companies, the speeds that companies expect where they operate, and what is actually available in some of the locations around Ontario, even those that have high-speed internet. As you might expect, most did not upgrade companies did not upgrade to faster internet packages during the pandemic, largely as you would expect, because their employees were largely at home. So why would you? It stands to reason that few would then upgrade their office internet connections or begin spending more money. When asked about sort of company workflow and productivity, of course, one of the outputs of the change in workflow, most were able to manage the transition quite effectively, with just about 2/3 saying that they were these were more or less the same in terms of their efficiency and their productivity as they were before the pandemic, which is a testament to this group's ability to move quickly and adapt rapidly. Even more interestingly, almost all respondents, so basically everybody but one, suggested that they expect either a remote work future, or far more commonly, some hybrid solution, as we keep all talking about, and are likely all experiencing ourselves at this time as some version of this hybrid reality. Continuing on the topic of workflow and productivity, we asked companies to reflect on the impacts that working from home has had, and what has been the biggest challenge in doing so, or concern they might have for the future. And by far, every respondent selected on this, please select all that apply, that building a company culture and a team in a distributed manner and a remote manner is challenging, and we're likely to continue to be challenging. Efficiency, productivity, and security, all things we've talked about. Broadband availability, these are all themes that we've talked about, many of which I've already introduced, also were raised by companies as concerns. One potential solution, of course, to a more distributed workflow is the adoption of more cloud-based computing, allowing remote workers to access clouds, either to access the data from, or content from that cloud as a storage device, or to ship your computing power to that cloud, so you don't have to ship $7,000 computers to every corner of Ontario. So when we asked, okay, well, what are you using? The most common response is that they were, that they were using some form of cloud-based technology, and for what purpose? Mostly, remote desktop. And without throwing a line to a particular company, I didn't know what Teradici was when I started this project, and now I know all about it, because I got to hear about it in great detail and its various implementations from a variety of companies. It being, of course, a remote desktop or a virtual VPN solution. Most companies surveyed also still maintain their on-premises infrastructure, which, of course, those two things go together. If you still maintain on-premises infrastructure, you would want to have a VPN to get you to that infrastructure. And mostly using those services, those services for data transfer and storage and computing capacity in equal parts. On average, you can see that companies are spending on, those that pay for such services, that on-premises infrastructure is more costly on a month-to-month, or that I wouldn't say it's more costly. That's perhaps not an accurate description. Companies are spending more money on on-premises infrastructure than they are on cloud-based technologies. The reason I put it that way is that we don't know the degree to which companies have shifted their overall infrastructure towards cloud-based technologies. The previous slide would suggest that they haven't done so to a great degree. So it is likely that they're spending more on premises because they're using more on-premises infrastructure. Although you can see that very few are co-locating servers in dedicated facilities, and so there's a very little spending on that, or comparatively little spending on that particular solution. When asked looking forward, what responding companies are most concerned about is the long-term cost of this hardware as it compares to on-premises infrastructure. And I mean concerns here not necessarily in a bad way. What are they thinking about? What are companies wondering about? And I think and this was true both in the survey and interviews we conducted, is that it's interesting to think about it now, and you can see some companies could see the immediate benefits. But are there unintended longer-term consequences or longer-term costs that are not being captured in that initial sales pitch? And that was consistently the most common concern or common topic of discussion. Its effect on productivity was a not somewhat close second. Lesser concerns include the cost of labor, or initial cost of labor and capital to implement such cloud-based technologies as compared with the sort of tried and true on-premises solutions, and the efficiency in maintaining them from an IT perspective. You have everything in one place, it could be somewhat more efficient. One topic that we added as we went through this process was the notion of data security. As you alluded to earlier, it's one of those concerns that companies had when moving to a remote work footing. And again, VPNs are used, they're most common cloud computing technology, or most common for remote work technology, but also most commonly used technology to help ensure the security of the data. Indeed, we could have a whole hour just on data security and on data security requirements as they relate to remote work practices. What clients of CASO's members have allowed in the pandemic context, what they will allow going forward, they may not be the same things. And finally, before we move to the sort of employee perspective, we started to ask companies to think ahead in terms of what they're likely to use. And interestingly enough, although most companies, 80-90% of companies are envisioning responding companies are envisioning some version of a hybrid future, only about half are thinking that they will retain these new security precautions after the pandemic. So there's a little bit of maybe if we go somewhat back to the office, we may not have to keep all of these safety or data security precautions. And that we found is sort of an interesting disconnect. And it also when we asked this also in sort of an open-ended way, and these of companies in interviews, and they all, there's a clear willingness of the industry to rise to the occasion and to meet whatever security needs and find a way somehow to meet the security needs that their clients have been asking them for. But also a push towards industry standards such as trusted partner networks or TPN guidelines, and sort of creating more of a systematic approach to, or a systemic approach, I might say, to approaching data security precautions. So I'm going to jump through again, we asked about 140 people about their experiences working in the pandemic in Ontario's visual effects and animation industries. As you can see, which is no surprise to anybody, almost everybody, when we asked them, was working from home, as are most of us right now on this call. So that stands to reason. When we asked employees about, and we did this also to be clear, with companies, but we asked employees to sort of say, okay, well, what do you need to do your job in terms of bandwidth? And you'll see that their answers depended largely, and it's very small, I understand, but the answers depended largely on their role. So we kind of broke down their role in VFX. VFX is displayed here, both because it's the chart I had, and also because there was too few responses from animation folks to make a chart. We talked about it in text. But importantly, you'll see that there's a variety of different answers for some roles, but they all are above 50 megabits per second, and or almost all. I say, aside from maybe a coordinator and and a few other sort of small roles, but you can see that there's some that require between 500 megabits and a gigabit per second or above, thereby further underscoring the need to maybe redefine what high-speed broadband means in this context. We asked sort of, on the more human angle, we of course asked the corresponding questions to individuals working in these companies in terms of what they've liked, what they enjoyed, and what they found challenging about working remotely. The lack of commute, although my least favorite thing about working remotely, is everybody's favorite thing. Almost everybody's favorite thing about working remotely. Reduced living expenses and a better work-life balance and more flexibility were also quite popular. And on the other end, though, and this relates very well, very much to the building of corporate cultures, the need to bounce ideas off people in a more ad hoc manner, or feelings of isolation. Those those are things that corporate culture used to deal with, and used to help bring people together and help them, collaborate in more effective ways. So we sort of find that that those challenges line up quite well with those that were experienced by the company respondents. And finally, as it relates to this employee survey, we asked companies to think about their future, or sorry, individuals think about their future. What are they likely to do? And as you see, this is a far more even split in terms of companies, in terms of employees, either thinking that they're going to continue to work from home indefinitely, or work from, or be more likely to work from a hybrid solution. Keep in mind, though, that companies predicted almost all companies thought that they were going to work in a hybrid model. So I think that individuals or employees are somewhat more likely to think that they're going to continue working in a remote setting. Also point out, though, it's not really part of our study, that there is this. All of this is occurring within the context of a global shortage of skilled talent. So it might be that companies get that remote work, that employees demanding remote work may get their way more than companies may ideally want them to. Because if you can work remotely for a company in Ontario, you can also work remotely for a company not in Ontario. And with that bracing thought, I will move to some recommendations. We did make some recommendations. I can't actually recall at the beginning of this if we were asked to, but you really can't stop consultants from making recommendations. So we did. And the first is really kind of the sort of obvious one, right? Is that, there's material in this report and elsewhere that can help build effective hybrid working models. And that can be from studio policies and protocols around onboarding. It can be around helping about better leveraging communication tools that help workers, connect to each other and lessen that sense of isolation, which we noted earlier. It can also be about really sharing, finding ways or reinforce company culture and employee satisfaction, which is particularly important as you grow, because what we found in both in Nordicity, but also in almost all the interviews we conducted, is that it was okay working with people who had worked together before remotely, but adding new people to a remote work dynamic is a different game entirely. You don't have those neural pathways, if you will, to fall back upon when looking to communicate better, because you don't know how people operate, learn their style. Yeah. So the report provides some hopeful guidance in that way of how to build such an effective hybrid working model. At the same time, I think the importance of continuing to meet client demands and expectations on data security will continue to be important, and that a large part of that is understanding what clients' demands are, and maintaining that open dialogue with those clients. So because it has been so successful in so doing over the course of the last 2 years, that at least so we've heard, and continuing to build, I guess let's call them protocols or processes around things like the trust, TPN or trusted partner networks that give companies access, ability to more readily partner with each other and with clients. And penultimately, you could perhaps sense some of my frustration as it relates to the availability of accurate broadband data, but that's just the data part. I think the industry also needs to advocate for available and stable broadband infrastructure, and to actually know real levels of availability. 50 megabits per second will not, as we've learned, be sufficient for many roles in the VFX industry, or animation for that matter. So as broadband continues to roll out in eastern and northern Ontario and in other places, actually having real high speed as opposed to theoretical high speed would be good. Or even just knowing where that is. I mean, without having to ask for, the actual for, 500 megabits per second in a rural location, knowing where there are pockets of real high-end availability would allow companies to have better conversations with their employees who are looking to move to those to such locations. And there's some other, we have some other recommendations you can read here, but I want to move in the interest of time to my final one so we can get to some comments, which is that we continue to have exactly the conversation we're having right now, is to continue to build on the successful partnership between industry and government, share information, keep doing what we're doing right now, because this is not an unimportant connection. This is something that allows, that continues to allow the industry to do studies like this, to have and to develop information, and to better understand how the industry can help meet government's policy objectives. And now I'll stop for Q&A. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. There we go.
Everyone, please don't jump in at once.
Yeah, it's a wide open forum, so just unmute yourself and go for it.
And if you don't have anything right now, you can always follow up later with us. It doesn't mean you cannot do that later. So I know it's a lot to cover off.
I see
I'll
Chris.
jump in. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's a good one from Wes. I got a good one from Wes, which is this the same? If you've done any research on other work from other industries, is this the same? So we've done work from studies from work as it relates to every creative industry, as they've tried, maybe not book publishing, but that one's pretty easy because they were already at home. They just continue to be at home. And it is very similar to what you'd find in video games, particularly the relationship is like animation and video games seem to kind of move in the same way, because they didn't have the like a dependency of somebody else's product that they needed to augment or to work upon. So there was a similar, not entirely true, but I'm generalizing, sort of lack of dependence or independence, let's say, and you built their ability to sort of, okay, we're going to shift from a work from home setting and kind of go from there. And so many of the costs were the same too. I mean, there's a picture, I think it's Mainframe, it's Mainframe's picture in Vancouver of the warehouse of computers that they shipped in March 2020, and they shipped an entire warehouse, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of computers to their employees. And there's similar ones that you'll see from folks like, Ubisoft doing exactly the same thing. I'd say though that the biggest, just be lucky you're not music, because that music industry was deleteriously affected by the pandemic in ways that I think other creative industries, were perhaps better able to avoid. So yeah, I mean, to your point about is it the same findings? One of the things that we found as we went through this study is that like printing things, that's true. You can't print things from home. That's an also true thing that you cannot. When we go through the study, we found that many of the sort of work from home concepts and challenges were as true for the interviewer as they were for the interviewee. So a lot of the conversations seem to not devolve, but move into like a almost a group therapy session where we were sharing what Nordicity was doing to overcome a challenge that was similar to what challenges were being faced by the animation or VFX company being interviewed. So
Christian, I think Krista has a question for you. Go ahead, Krista.
Thanks, Sarah. And thank you, Christian. That's a very, this is a great study to set a benchmark for our industry. That's obviously very important that we have it documented. My question is actually directed more towards, I think, Nisha and CASO, because, you know, now that we have this, I mean, we've been talking about this throughout the pandemic and have met periodically to discuss, you know, getting the study underway. But I'm curious, like, how do we build on this and how do we move forward? Because we know the importance of, you know, obviously growing our industry and maintaining, probably to some degree, although unknown, these work from home practices. So how do we move forward as a collective industry to get everyone sort of behind it and to approach the telecommunication companies and how we can gain their support so that we can continue to be competitive on the global scale?
Thank you, Krista. That's a longer term question, but I do understand it's something we need to do. And I believe that Marguerite and Magali had kicked that off a couple of years ago. And our findings at the time was for our industry in this part of the sector, it was more individually driven and not as wide scale as we needed it to be. So there wasn't enough mass to get that preferential pricing. But I do know that Matt is also looking into that, maybe on a more commercialized basis. But for the individual artists, I know, we're working on the workforce development with the city. And so that's going to help with our growth. But in terms of bandwidth, because it seems everyone was paying for their own bandwidth. At the end of the day, well, you were on part of that, Guru and many other companies. What ended up happening was everyone wanted someone else to pay for it. And, including Beanfield and whoever they want, and Rogers, right? They want to be paid. And we were hoping for it to be subsidized somewhat, but it wasn't. So I would say that if we look at a more commercialized use of it, where you have in different outside of the city, that could be something that we could look and see. Well, what is scale? What is the scale? Is it worth it for them? Because if it's not worth it for them, they're not going to be able to offer the discount. It has to be a win-win for both on that front. But for the growth, I think what we've started with the workforce development, that is something that we could do a lot with everyone here at the table.
Matt, did you want to jump in?
Definitely, yeah. To build on what Nisha is saying, and Krista, thanks for the question. This does actually kind of go part and parcel with our next webinar and our next mandate, which is really on the talent shortage and the new talent mandate. I think what's really exciting about this study is that it shows in a time of crisis that this industry actually not only survived, but it thrived. And now that we look to the future, we all are in a massive hiring spree. There's not enough talent. And I think what's great about this is that prior to the pandemic, outside of a few outliers, our industry really existed in 2 cities in Ontario. And that's not great for a province the size of Ontario, but now we're basically saying that we not only can grow in our in the primary areas, but we can also grow in secondary areas that people weren't thinking about before. And we now know that the talent wants that. And so I think as we kind of, focus in on our next upcoming webinar, which I'll plug at the end, but it's going to be January 26th and fantastic, where we start to peel back some of those layers. So we can try to, fill that talent mandate that we all have, but then also look at not only do these individuals have to come in and live in, an urban center, that they can live anywhere in Ontario, as long as we have the broadband access that we're providing. And then as we look at the next realm of technology, low Earth orbit satellites, Starlink's going to be interesting. Bezos is releasing a new one too. So it's I think also from the domestic partners, it's also time that they have to open up their eyes to that evolving technology. Because once that technology is proven, which is not 100% there yet, but that's tomorrow's technology, then that's opening us up to more rural areas. And again, Ontario has so much to offer in those areas. And so I think what we have to do as CASO as well is make sure that we are marketing the province as well, because I think for people moving from other areas and other jurisdictions, it's great to know that like the whole province is open. You can work for any one of us anywhere.
Thank you, Matt. Krista, did that answer your question for now?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I think that's really great. And I think that, to both of your points, it's prudent that we stay ahead of the workforce gaps and obviously the infrastructure that's needed in order to fill those seats and facilitate all the work. So I am, thank you for CASO, continuing to take the helm and look at grants and infrastructure support and talent support for our industry, because that's definitely what's going to keep Ontario competitive with the rest of the world. So thank you.
Yeah, we are competing globally now, right? I mean, for talent and for work. So it's going to be an interesting year.
If I may, it's also interesting from if you're looking at your tax credit, which is a labor-based tax credit, you're looking at, do I turn down this work because I don't have enough people here? Or do I take on that work and hire people that are not tax credit eligible? You're tumbling the numbers to see how that works. So that will be interesting too, because pre-COVID, I don't think many companies worked outside the tax credit space when they were looking at work. And I think now they're going to tumble it both ways because the volume is so much higher than immediate capacity.
Yeah, I was just gonna on a similar point. I was gonna point out that means that when you work in Ontario you can work anywhere in Ontario, and and be for these companies, they can also work for anywhere else in the world too, right? So there's it's everybody's upping their game at the same time, and I guess that's another thing, Wes, that's similar to other industries responding to the pandemic, is that that's people are running those numbers, and if somebody needs 40% less salary to live in rural Sudbury than they would in downtown Toronto, that's still cheaper than and for somebody in Quebec that might still be cheaper than paying somebody from downtown Montreal, right? So those are calculations being made everywhere in the world at the same time. So I think that might require more coordination at either the city levels or provincial levels than has been the case previously, to try to mitigate some of that, us eating each other's lunches constantly. So I think these are questions that to be dealt with later, but these are things that I think that come up a lot in all of these discussions around sort of pandemic related things. So
I think, Christian, you're coining your next survey, which I thought you were going to say Hawaii or Thailand or someplace exotic.
New Zealand, that'd be my bet.
Never your spot. We have Andrew from the Royal Bank, one of our sponsors for this document, on the call, and to answer perhaps part of Wes's question about other industries. Andrew, how are you finding the hybrid versus employee expectation and so on? How are you finding that for the banking scenario?
Hey, Sarah. I'm glad you clarified towards the end. So yeah, we're predominantly focused on media and entertainment, so it's a similar industry. But what we're facing kind of internally at the bank really is, I think, in line with what we discussed at the AGM. There is a war for talent. If anyone had an inkling of wanting to go and take their career in a different direction or to pursue something, they're taking advantage of it now. So turnover and churn is a pressing issue, I think that there's a number of folks that have quite honestly moved on from certain roles, and they're taking engagements where they're working remotely. And you can see that on kind of LinkedIn job postings. There's just more opportunities to work remotely. Things are more competitive, and it's more difficult to kind of retain momentum. So there's a huge amount of effort and resources and money, quite frankly, that's being committed to ensuring that we attract and retain the right talent.
Right. If I may further, again, with Wes's question about other industries, we are lucky enough to have Alexander Wesika on the call with us today, who is a senior person of what I consider great importance at Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade with the province of Ontario. And Alexander, I know you will have looked at all kinds of other industries as part of what you do. Is this sort of the same sentiment that you're hearing from other members of your file, that they're finding a talent shortage and highly competitive market?
First of all, thank you very much for organizing this, Sarah. It was excellent. Christian, great job on the study, and hello, everyone. To your point, it's really a common thread. We're hearing this across the board, across the broader ICT sector in terms of the talent. A lot of the companies are looking at, regionalizing their operations, setting up smaller operations. There's a greater demand from the talent for this flexibility, which is obviously a major concern for companies from a retention standpoint. I've talked to a few companies that recently established in Ontario, and what they're seeing in their head office operations in the States is traditional positions that they normally hire for are being poached by big technology companies in California with 2x salary, work remotely from where you are right now without any other issues. So they're working remotely on project teams, which a lot of these technology companies generally have the experience to do. They'll have global project teams. And so it's really not a big ask on their from their perspective, because they've had kind of the business process and workflow that has already existed. But what's happening is that the talent is actually taking up the opportunity. So they may have had specialized skills in certain areas in the creative industries, but now they're taking up positions in broader technical areas of technology that they might not have considered before. So it's definitely happening. And I think the kind of the narrative that's been discussed today, I think there's going to be a greater need to be agile in terms of how you look at your business going forward and how you structure those opportunities, because talent, I think, kind of has the upper edge right now in terms of dictating some of the conditions that they would like, because of the balance that they've experienced with remote work, and also the costs that they personally have saved from doing that work remotely. So it may not necessarily always be about a higher salary, but maybe it's a combination or mix of how the work is actually being structured.
That's fascinating.
Thank you, Alexander.
Now, I know we've hit that magic hour, and I want to thank everybody for their time to come out today for this. I want to thank Nordicity for all the hard work they put in on this. Ontario Creates, we couldn't have done it without you. The City of Toronto, Stratagem Studios, Beanfield Metro Connect, and of course, the scrappy upstart RBC. We'll see how they make out. Again, so thankful for everyone who's been a part of this process. This is also a great segue. January 26th, the shortage and war on talent. Everyone is circling back to the exact same thing. And the best part is we now know where they can work. Now let's get them to work. So we're going to send out some information. It's going to be for all CASO members. We have a great panel of both studio owners and artists, so we can talk about how we can keep this going. Krista, I would love to get you involved. I think this is top of mind for so many people. So check out your email box, January 26th, mark it down. Have an amazing holiday. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Nice.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Matt. Thanks, team. Take care.
Take care. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you,
Aaron.
everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy
Take care.
holidays.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. Have a
Thank you, Christian. You rock, man.